Howdy, hackers, and welcome to another episode of FairLight TV. We've had a number of episodes that have been really long, but this one I can promise you is brief. I'm going to show you a little VIC trick. The C64 is filled with little anomalies inside the VIC that you can exploit to make your demo effects. So, over to the VIC trick. All right, so you know how the C64 sort of works. You have the area, which is the dark blue one you see on the screen here. That is where you can put graphics. So that is sort of the addressable part where graphics can show. And that graphics could be character-based, as it is in the text mode you see now, and it can also be bitmap. And you can also have it in high res, which is what it is now, or you can have it in multicolor, which is what you tend to have when you're using bitmap mode. Not always, but you tend to have. And then around that you have that border, which I've already shown you how you should be able to remove it. Especially upper and lower is really easy, but side border more complex, a lot more complex. So you have the graphics and you have sprites. And one of the things you can do with it is that you can have a set of priorities. So if a number of sprites appear at the same location on the screen, they would be stacked on top of each other according to a set priority. So sprite 0 is always the one that comes on top, and then like the higher number goes underneath. So the only thing you could do to have sort of this sprite being my left hand and this one being my right hand, if you want to swap that, you cannot sort of swap hardware sprite 0 and 1. You need to swap the content of hardware sprite 0 and 1. And the other part is there is a register that is the priority between the content of the sprite and characters. So you can have 1 bit, there is 1 bit in this register, and that one sets if the sprite or the graphics would have precedence, if they show up on the same place. The quirky part here is, what if this one, which is the higher priority sprite, has lower priority than graphics, and this lower priority sprite has higher priority than the graphics? What happens if we take them and move them into where graphics is shown? Wouldn't that be fun? I've taken one of my old little projects that I've shown here before, a little joystick steering of sprites. I just added a few things and we will have a look at that. And also, if you would like access to my source code for this one, it's available on GitLab. So just get your GitLab account and let me know, and I would be happy to share it. And of course, it's one of those things. Feel free to use it. If you want to credit me, that's absolutely fine. So over to what it actually looks when we play with priority. All right, let's have a very, very brief roll through of this thing. So I'm using the joystick port DC000, and I'm printing on a printing location. That's just a constant I'm picking because it's sort of the lowest row on the screen. This is a macro for setting the basic upstart, so when I run it, it would always have sort of a little basic header so I can load it and run it. I'm setting up a raster interrupt, so this is killing the timers, setting up the raster interrupt, what row of the raster interrupt, IRQ pointer, so the IRQ handling routine is pointed at that. I take a sprite and copy it down to 0340 because that is the tape buffer. That's a very handy way if you're only having a few sprites and you want to show them, and they are really good for examples. Nothing probably you will use in your real code, but for the purpose of this, it's a fine area to use for it. Then set the sprite pointers to point to that area. So this is how you do it. 0340 divided by 40 gives you sort of the index of the sprite. And then since the screen is on 0400, that means that the pointer to the content of the sprite is at start of the screen plus 03F8, the last 8 bytes of that 1K block. That's where the first 1000 bytes are occupied by the screen. Okay, and then I'm turning on sprite 0 and 1, and I'm setting positions for sprites. That's, yeah, we need to have a default thing. I should also be able to set colors here, but they are defaulting to, in this case, white and red, so I don't change that. It's just happen automatically. It's bad to assume that things are in a certain stage when you start a program, but yeah, I've taken the liberty here. And then I'm setting this magical priority here. So the 1, I think this means graphics is prioritized over sprites. So yeah, and this is the thing. So DO1B is what you can play with. And then I'm just taking a string and printing it so there is something on the screen that I can move the sprites behind and in front of. And I'm also setting 3FFF. I'm opening the lower and upper border, so this is just making sure that that looks neat. And then I'm doing clear interrupt and returning from subroutine. So I am actually having normal basic prompts. So I will be able to type during the demo. And then I can also use the mouse pointer. Okay, the IRQ current sprite is, it holds the value 0 or 1 depending on which is the active sprites, because the joystick can only steer one of them and I'm toggling through them. Yeah, opening border, yeah, and yeah, current sprite and then ASL and tax. So that's using 2 bytes per I'm multiplying the current sprite pointer by 2, because when I'm moving the register, I'm going to need to multiply the sprite index by 2, because X and Y are stored next to each other. You could, of course, the VIC could have had all the X register in one go and then all the Y register in one go, and then I could just use 2 different locations. But here I need to multiply it to ensure that X and Y are both accounted for. A little routine for that. If you have any issues following that, then I'm sure you would eventually find out. And feel free to comment as well. I will try to elaborate more if this is the complex part. The really complex part is that because the screen is wider than 255 bytes or pixels, then if you want to move it outwards, you need to set a certain register in, or you need to set a bit in DO10 as well. So that is that. But apart from that, this should be really self-explanatory. And then the current sprite, I have an option where you press the button on the joystick, it toggles between sprite 0 and 1 here. I'm printing the location they have, both the X and Y of the 2 sprites. Not a big thing here as well. I think that should be quite straightforward. And then also resetting DO11. Again, this is because I'm opening the border, so I need to fiddle with DO11 here. And I'm setting the color of the background. And then I have a little routine for printing a hex value. Feel free to use that one if you want to. It's quite straightforward. And then I've generated this sprite, and I prefer not to have the full block. I could of course have 21 times 3, FF. That would be a block. I've made it a little bit rounder to be a little bit neater. And then a little string that's printed on the screen. So let's get over to how this actually look when we run it. Oh, running it now. Okay, so the way the UX is designed here is that you see that I open change the color of the background there. It's white to indicate that I'm steering the sprite that is white, and then I can press the button sorry, the joystick button here. I should be able to do that like that. Oh yeah, and now you see that it turns red, so now I can actually steer the other sprite. Okay, yeah, I need to press really fast. Okay, so now I'm steering the white one, and you can also see the position being updated. That one is sprite 0, and then the red one is sprite 1. That means that by hardware default, which you cannot override, the white sprite will always be on top of the red. So if you have, like my left hand here and my right hand here being the white and the red, they will always be like that. So the white one will always be on top of the red one. If I would like my sort of right hand here be on top of the other one, I would need to change which hardware sprite is associated with which graphics. So it would still be that sprite 0 is the top one. It's just that the sprite 0 now looks like this rather than this. I hope that was sort of understandable. Okay, and let's also change this to white because we will see. So if I'm running it here, you can see that sprite 0, the higher priority sprite, is lower priority than the characters. And let's move the other one here. So the red one, the lower priority sprite, is a higher priority than graphics. Right, so it's covering the graphics, whereas graphics is clearly seen on top of the white one. So let's see what happens if we allow the white, the higher priority sprite, to go on top of the red one. That's really cool, right? Now you can see that the higher priority white one, still lower priority than graphics, allows graphics to see through. Even if we have a red sprite, the lower priority sprite, which has a higher priority than the graphics. So the thing is here that the sprite to graphics priority takes precedence over the sprite to sprite priority, I guess you can say. It might not look like much, but for me this is sort of mind-boggling. There was a priority problem. If you have two priorities, you need to change to take into account which priority has priority. So this is it. Sprite to graphics priority has priority over sprite priority. Has this ever been used in demos? Yes, of course. Has it been used in a FairLight demo? Yes, of course. We will have a little look at when this has been used in a FairLight demo. The FairLight demo 1337, and we have to watch this really slow because, or we need to be very careful when we watch it. Because obviously Trident didn't think this was a very impressive demo effect that could be used during minutes of screen time. It's briefly used. So around 340, he engages the priority weapon. So here you see sprites and graphics and priority. So the sprite is covering, but then you have that sprite that allows the underneath graphics to shine through the covering sprites. Oops. Yeah, so that was the few seconds that this technique got to be shown in a demo such as 1337. But now at least you know how that is done, and you can do the same. And if you would like the source code, just let me know, and I would be happy to invite you to that GitLab repo of mine. That was everything I planned to have for today. Do subscribe unless you do it already, and do order a FairLight TV t-shirt from redbubble.com. See you next time. Bye bye.